Interventionist Step-by-Step Guide for Parents. And I'm also the host of this YouTube channel called Recovery Talk. If you're new to this channel, please hit subscribe and stay up to date on all things recovery. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing a man who needs no introduction. Mark Astor was born in the United Kingdom and raised there until he was 21, a graduate of University of Michigan, Southeastern University, and American University. That's my alma mater, I don't know if you knew that. Mark is the founding partner of Drug and Alcohol Attorneys in South Florida, which represents families that are in crisis because of originating from addiction and mental illness. When Mark is not kicking ass in the courtroom, I took this from your website, he's kicking ass in the dojo. Mark is a second-degree black belt in Krav Maga, right? Did I say that? Krav Maga?
You did.
An Israeli system of hand-to-hand combat. So welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to have you. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me on. I very much appreciate you doing this. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. And I think, you have a lot of good information to share both personally and professionally, and I'm excited to hear it. So, so let me ask you, how does a kid from the UK wind up in Boca Raton, Florida, representing families in crisis from addiction and mental illness? What was the motivator there?
Okay, so
how'd you get here?
Okay, that's quite that's a lot of information. So long story short is, and I'll try to make it a short story. So back in the early 80s, my parents had a condo.
Take your time. It's really about who you are personally and your motivation. But go ahead, take your time. No rush.
Yep. So back in the early 80s, my parents had a condo actually down in Lauderdale. And we came here for many years, just on family vacations, Christmas time, summertime, when we'd spend, probably 3 months of the year out here. And then late 80s, they decided to make a permanent move. So fast forward to 1987, my parents were planning a move, and I actually came here to visit a friend who was I was supposed to be just staying here in South Florida for a couple of weeks. I ended up digressing and going to visit a friend up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I fell in love with the school and the girl. I didn't marry the girl, but I feel like I'm still married to the school.
But you committed to the school.
I committed to the school. I transferred in, ended up finishing up my undergrad to the University of Michigan. And my parents, about 6 months later, made the move to South Florida. I decided my last semester of college that I should have some profession under my belt, although I can't tell you I was particularly passionate about the practice of law. But my father, who had left school at 14, and my mother, who had left school at 16 and between the two of them had no formal education, said, look, if you become a professional man, a licensed practitioner, you'll probably always make a decent living. So I decided to go to law school, and I decided to come back down to South Florida because, frankly, as much as I loved the Midwest and the people up there, it was just too cold in the winter. Yeah. So I came down here. I got into Nova. The end of my second year, when I was really burned out from law school and didn't actually even want to go back for my third year, I got an opportunity to intern with the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office. So they have a program here in Florida where it enables you to be what's called a certified legal intern. And you take certain classes in law school, you can go and intern with a governmental agency like the Attorney General's Office, Public Defender's Office, State Attorney's Office. And basically you can do almost everything the lawyers can do, including trying cases. Oh, wow. So I did that. I tried a dozen jury trials, which had never been done by an intern. I did an appellate argument, which had never been done by an intern. And thank God, it was the only job I wanted. And they hired me the month before I graduated law school. Popped out of law school in May of 94. I went right back to work at the State Attorney's Office. And I stayed there until 1999. And after that, I was miserable. It doesn't pay well when you're a government lawyer, but the personal and professional satisfaction is off the charts.
A lot of good experience.
Yeah, it was a great experience. And my father had told me, you want to go work for the state. You want to work for the state. And God, it turned out to be such good advice. I can't tell you. Probably some of the best advice he's ever given me. So
when did you go to Washington? When did you go to American University?
Yeah. So in 2004, I'd just gotten divorced. I had a very short-term marriage. And I was really, quite frankly, just a bit lost. But I was very lost. I had no purpose in my life. I had plenty of money because I was doing criminal defense work and working for a family business, but I was completely miserable. So I needed a year off. I moved up to DC. I had a passion for politics and I wanted to get involved in a presidential campaign. So that's what I did. I moved to DC. I got embedded into the master's program up at American for law and government.
Mm-hmm.
And I got
which presidential campaign did
I
you?
worked for John. I worked for John on John Kerry's presidential campaign for a year.
Okay.
Although that shouldn't necessarily indicate to you which way I might have voted this year, but that's a whole other story that we're not going to discuss in the podcast.
No, we're not going to get
half
politics.
the people will start, sending me pipe bombs.
I'll get those mad faces instead of the likes.
I think part of me really wanted to get back, get myself in a situation where I felt like I was helping people, whatever that was, and I felt, I was somewhat upset about what had happened with the whole Iraq war thing. And I really felt like Kerry was going to sort of put the country back on the right track. And I started off as a volunteer there. Actually, ironically, I went to an event down here in South Florida. There was a big event down in Miami at a hotel. I think it was, can't remember what it was now, the name of the hotel, but that hotel doesn't exist anymore. But there were 2,000 people there. I met John Kerry, John Kerry's wife, John Edwards, who became the vice presidential nominee. And I met Marvin Nicholson, who was John Kerry's what they call the chief of staff, basically his right-hand man. And I told him I wanted to come work on the campaign, and that was it. I was off to the races. I started off as a volunteer, ended up doing legal work for the campaign. I was one of just a few lawyers that was part of what they call the voting rights legal team. I still have the placard on my wall. I spent 2 days in Southern Virginia monitoring the election for the DNC. And I was also, for about 3 months, I was part of the advance team that would work on the weekends and go out and meet either John Edwards or John Kerry at their plane at Reagan National. So I had a very full and fulfilling year. And
so you got to travel with them. You got to travel with them
I didn't travel with them. I didn't get to travel with them, unfortunately. But I was every weekend I was with the campaign, and when you're a candidate for president or vice president, you have like this traveling press corps. So all the people you'd ever seen on TV, like Fox and CNN, they were all traveling with the Kerry Edwards. So it was just the coolest. To say that it was a high, I hate to use that word on our podcast, but it was an adrenaline rush, and it really was. And then, I remember driving.
It's a good example of the kind of high you get when you're doing esteemable things on a, you're pursuing your passion. So I think that's an allowable terminology. Yeah.
So I came after I graduated from my master's, and the campaign was over. I came back down, and I was really a bit lost again. I then took off in 07 or 08. I took off and went to California for 3 years because I didn't know what to do, and I had a cousin out there, and I had a good time. Spent what was left of my money after the stock market and real estate market crashed in 08. Took the bar exam out there twice, failed it twice. I came back to South Florida because my father had gotten sick. I took the bar exam again and failed it. And I said, maybe the universe is trying to tell me something here. And then I got an opportunity to work for a company in Miami called How to Manage a Small Law Firm. And they teach lawyers the business side of the practice, right? Which is not a skill set they give us in law school.
Right.
But more than that, what they really were was a personal growth company. And their underlying philosophy was that financial growth has to be preceded by personal growth, right? Which is somewhat of a dichotomy, right? A personal growth company for lawyers. Can you believe that? Right. And after a year there, what I realized, in addition to learning a whole new skill set in terms of how to run my business, was the reason I had been so miserable and didn't want to practice law was I wasn't helping anybody. I didn't feel good about what I was doing. And I said, okay, that's the missing piece. Now, what do I do to get that feeling? And I realized from my time in the criminal system and just close personal friends and family that I was surrounded by people who had substance use and mental illness. And that's who I should be helping, although I didn't know at the time how I was going to do it. So that's what I focused on doing. Right.
So was there somebody in your family, somebody that was close to you that suffered with mental illness or addiction that kind of drove you to this practice?
I mean, I had family members who had issues of, with depression and anxiety. And I had some very close friends who either had a substance use issue and, shared that with me afterwards, or had family members who had a substance use issue. And that was, I don't know, maybe the nudge that I needed from the universe to say, okay, this is the collection of people you should be helping. These are the people that need your help. So
well, that's good. Well, you're certainly somebody who's out front in terms of helping families with Marchman Acts and bakeract. So let me ask you, so for the folks watching, can you quickly define the difference between what is the Marchman Act and what is the Bakeract?
Okay.
And I know that it's, every state has its own thing. It's not called the Bakeract. I know in other states, in California, I think it's the 5150 and all those things. But go ahead.
So every state has some type of involuntary commitment statute, be it for mental illness, substance use, alcohol, things of that nature. Okay, they all have our version of the Baker Act. So the Baker Act in Florida is a 72-hour stabilization statute, which allows basically the law enforcement or an emergency room doctor or some type of what they call qualified professional, could be a licensed clinical social worker, who makes the determination that due to some type of mental health issue, this person presents as a danger to themselves or others, and they invoke a 72-hour hold period, okay? And it's supposed to be, and I say that tongue in cheek, it's supposed to be for stabilization. It is not a treatment statute, okay?
Right.
If the facility makes a determination, not the family, but the facility makes a determination that they need to go beyond 72 hours, they can then petition the court to basically have the state step into the family's shoes and start making decisions, medical decisions for that person, which is where it gets abused. The Marchman Act is an involuntary commitment statute for substance use, primary substance use and mental illness, and it allows for somebody to be court ordered into treatment for a period of up to 90 days. And that 90 days can get extended. So we typically use it minimum 3 months, typically closer to 6. So one's for treatment, one's for stabilization.
So the Marchman Act is unique to the state of Florida.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Texas might have something, but not quite what we have.
Yeah, I think Kentucky has Casey's Law, which was named after a child that was that had an issue. So that's the closest thing I'm aware of. So
if a family, so usually, when I get calls as an interventionist, one of the things that comes up is, we're thinking about a Marchman Act or we're thinking about a Baker Act, and I kind of explain the difference. And I've had a couple of situations where we've done interventions. One case in particular where if you would have asked me, is this kid going to treatment? I would have said, absolutely. All the ingredients were there: the mom, the dad, the caring family, good kid, smart kid. We just couldn't get him to go. It's an intervention that went on not only for several hours, but then repeated another time. And ultimately, we did Marchman Act him. What was funny about it was the minute the judge signed the papers, he delivered himself to treatment. There was no argument. He just went.
Yeah, we see that a lot. And I think what's really going on is that, you probably know this better than I do, but one of the things that we sort of see is the people that, there's a difference between going to treatment and staying in treatment, right? There's a difference between getting
Correct.
Staying clean. Yeah. And I think the hardest decision for somebody who has a substance use disorder, and it's been going on for years, is not just to make the commitment to go in, but to stay in. And it's sort of this backwards and forwards. And from my experience, if somebody can make that decision for them, you totally take the pressure off of them. They haven't had to make the decision.
Right.
All they're going to do is just do the treatment.
Right.
So I think there's a certain psychological component to making that decision versus having somebody else make it for you.
Well, I think there's a lot of fear, coming at an intervention or approaching someone that has a substance abuse issue. Their drugs and alcohol to them is their solution. And as a recovering addict myself, I can tell you, and I was just telling someone about this last night, having this conversation, the day that I took my first pill, was one of the happiest days of my life because I'd found the solution, and now you want to take the solution away from me. So I think and then for me, it was like, well, how am I going to live my life? How am I going to, people fall into a place where they think the only reason they're functioning because of the drugs. They don't really see accurately what's happening to them. But there's that 5-inch fear. They're afraid. We get them inside the treatment center and they look around and they go, oh, this is not what I thought. This is not jail. This is actually pretty nice.
Right. I mean, they're not in jail. I mean, they're not in custody. I mean, that's another thing. Some parents say, well, I want you to lock my kid up. lock them up. I'm like, well, it's not a criminal. I can't lock them up. They haven't committed a crime. They have a disease. I mean, do you really want to lock them up? I mean, if they get arrested, yeah. I mean, don't worry, the state will lock them up. You won't have to worry about me doing it. So obviously, we can't lock anybody up, at least not initially. But the whole idea is to have some kind of consequence for them if they do leave, which is contempt.
Right.
So
they're disobeying a court order.
You got it.
Yeah. So what does it look like? A family comes to you. They said, we want to, our son or daughter is an addict. We want to Marchman them into treatment. What does that process look like from your standpoint? What are the steps you have to take to do it?
Yeah. So the first part of it is what we call triage in the case, right? Finding out, getting a history, like how long's it been going on for? If they're using drugs, what's the drug of choice? Have they been to treatment? If so, how many facilities? What's the longest they stayed there? What's the longest they stayed in recovery? So we get an idea of what's going on. I mean, is there a particular facility they want to send the person? Which county are they in? Because which county they're in is where I have to file this thing, even if they're not a Florida resident.
Right.
So all those things, sort of come into play. If it looks like, we can handle the case, it's a good case for us. And if the family decides they want to work with us, and obviously the first part is to get the person assessed. The court cannot order treatment under the Marchman Act statute without a written assessment. So basically, a qualified professional coming in and telling the judge, I've reviewed the petition, I've spoken to the family, we did drug testing, I spoke to the respondent. This is my expert opinion as to what they need. That's
so just in part one, how do you file you file with the court, and the police go and pick the individual up?
Sometimes. Okay, so that assessment can be court ordered one of two ways: on an emergency basis or non-emergency. Typically, because nobody wants to call a lawyer, they call us because they're sort of desperate, and we're sort of the last call.
In crisis, yeah.
Right, you got it. It's always an emergency. Now, whether or not the court will see it that way is a different story. 9 times out of 10, the court does. Sometimes the judge doesn't agree with you. So if we file for an emergency court order for assessment, the court is going to authorize us to use the police. And if it's Palm Beach County, I got my own cop on staff too, to go out there and pick that person up and take them somewhere and keep them there for a 5 to 7 day period. And if they need detox, they get detoxed. And during that period, we're going to ask the court for a treatment services hearing. So, because we need a hearing to get the person into treatment. Once that's done, then we can have them court ordered into long-term treatment.
So you get to that point, the person is evaluated, the licensed therapist evaluates them and makes a determination. But does the court assign an attorney to the individual?
Yeah, so the statute says they have a right to be represented by counsel, and a bit like in a criminal case, even though this is civil, yeah, this is civil, but a bit like a criminal case where we're sort of talking about taking their liberty away, or at least suspending it temporarily while they're in treatment. They have a right to counsel. So if they meet certain financial qualifications like they would in a criminal case, the court is going to appoint them counsel to represent them. If they can't, then they're going to be told to go hire their own lawyer. So yeah, they have a right to look. They have a right to fight this thing until it can turn into a small trial.
Which sounds crazy to me because take the treatment, right? But what are you seeing in terms of that? Are you seeing are these attorneys that are representing the folks that we're trying to get into treatment? Are they trying to disprove? Are they trying, or are they aiding the process? What are you seeing with that?
So that's a really great question, Mark. So the lawyers that handle these cases work for what's known as the Office of Civil Regional Conflict Counsel. Basically, they are private lawyers that contract with the state to represent people who are being Marchman acted. And I will tell you, because I deal with them on a regular basis, these are all really, really good lawyers. I mean, these are very skilled lawyers. I've learned a lot from litigating against them. But I know if I'm in a certain county, I know who the lawyer is going to be. And so the lawyers that that handle these cases, they're sensitive to the nature of what we're doing here. So somebody, typically what they'll do, and I've done this because I've represented a couple of people on the other end of these things. I'll say, look, do you want to go to treatment? First of all, is there a problem here? If there's a problem, do you want to go to treatment? If they tell me they want to go to treatment, then I'm not going to talk them out of it. Okay.
Right. Sure.
If they say, look, I have a problem, but I don't want to go anyway, then I'll try to have, you know, an honest conversation with them about what the potential consequences of not going to treatment are. One of which could be, you know, ending up in the morgue or prison, right? But you know, as at the end of the day, if they say, look, I don't want to go and I ain't going, I want my hearing, then I, you know, I have an ethical obligation as a lawyer, you know, to fight for them, you know. And I mean, I did that for a long time doing criminal defense work, and I guess, you know, if it's, you have to have a certain internal fortitude to do that, right? And I guess maybe for me, I took an oath as a lawyer to, you know, to really provide my clients with effective assistance and counsel.
To represent your clients.
To represent my clients, right? I mean, we're not talking about homicidal maniacs here or rapists. If we were, I probably wouldn't be taking the case.
Right.
You know, so I give them their day in court. And sometimes, you know, I just had a case 2 days ago where I represented a woman who said, I'm not going to treatment. There's nothing wrong with me. And you know what? I mean, I think she had a valid complaint, but the judge didn't agree with her, and he's sending her to treatment.
Right. But did you think she did not need treatment?
I have to tell you, I wasn't sure, and I'll tell you why. Because when she got picked up, when she went for the assessment period, and they kept her for 6 days, they tested her for 14 different drugs, and she was negative for everything. Mm-hmm. So I had a serious concern as to whether or not she was really using. She was adamant that she wasn't, and I was inclined to agree with her. But the magistrate didn't agree with me, and you know, as a lawyer, I got to respect the ruling of the court, even if I don't agree with it.
Which I think is ultimately positive, because I've you know, you don't necessarily have to be drinking or using to need treatment. You know, I've had many cases myself with interventions where the individual will say to me, well, I haven't had a drink in 2 weeks, or I haven't had a drink in 3 weeks. I said, that's great. You'll have a very easy detox, but we're not really looking at your pattern over the last 2 weeks or month. We're looking at it over the last decade. Right. And yeah. And so I don't know what just happened here.
I can hear you, but I can't hear you. There you go.
Okay. Yeah. I some kind of indication about liquid or something. I don't know. So tell us about, so if you know, Palm Beach County seems to have very good treatment options.
They do.
Right.
Yep.
And Fort Lauderdale less, and then Miami even less. So if somebody's in Miami, in Dade County, and you file a Marchman and get them picked up, what kind of red tape or hurdles are you going to have to jump to get them into the treatment center of your choice?
Yeah, you know, that is a good question, Mark. You know, first of all, every county does things a bit differently. So sort of a big part of my job is figuring out, like, how does each county like it done, right? And I'll give you, for instance, in Broward County, the assessment and treatment filings are one case. In Palm Beach, there are two cases. Right, I file one case for assessment. I file a separate case for treatment. If I don't know that, and I go to file them in the same case, the clerk's going to reject my pleadings, and we're going to have a problem. Right. So you know, I got to figure out what's going on. But in terms of the assessment, when filing is an emergency, the police will not cross county lines, so the person has to be kept for that initial 5 to 7 day period in the county in which they're located. Once we go to a treatment services hearing, where I'm going to get them to treatment, I mean, I can send them anywhere you want. I mean, the judge will say, Mr. Astor, where do you want this person to go to? I mean, they can go anywhere. They at that point, they can go out of the county.
But not out of state.
Well, I've sent them out of state, but here's the rub. If I send somebody out of state and they're non-compliant, or God forbid they walk out of treatment, there's not much I can do, because they are now outside of the jurisdiction of the court. Right. So if a court here in Palm Beach County issues some type of violation notice, getting another state to recognize that, because it's civil and not criminal, is difficult. Right. If not impossible. Now, you could ask the court in another state to recognize it, but it's a whole other legal proceeding. So
I suppose my hope would be that once you get to that point, you can turn to the individual and say, hey, the treatment center we wanted to send to originally is in Maryland. It's phenomenal. They're, you know, hopefully the person would say, fine, I'll go, let's go. I'll get on the plane and go. But that's not always the case.
It's not always the case. And the statute also gives the magistrate or the judge some discretion to defer to the respondent. So if the response is, no, I don't want to go to XYZ treatment center, but I'd like to go to this one, you know, ABC, as long as they're, comparative in terms of the level of care, residential versus residential,
appropriate care, yeah,
then the judge or magistrate may likely defer to that person, as long as we know that if there's something going on at the other treatments, they're like their significant, their girlfriend or boyfriend happens to be at that facility, and that's what's really driving them to go
we don't
there.
like that. Yeah, we don't like that.
We do not like, because that's a recipe for disaster.
Correct.
Then I'm gonna say to the magistrate, Your Honor, look, she just walked. They were in treatment together for the last 3 months and did nothing, and they walked out together. They got to be separate, or it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
No, obviously. So one of the things that I just lost my thought. This is the problem with aging, Mark.
I was saying, you know what? I guess apparently I'm not the only one.
No, you're not the only one. I worry myself sometimes. I was going to ask about guardianships, and so tell me about that. Do Pam so I know what I was going to ask is that I have a family I'm working with now, and their son is on the latter half of 17. He'll be 18 in not too long, and one of my suggestions to them was to act before he's an adult. That's not to say that he's not going to be compliant, but once somebody turns 18, the parents don't have the same rights. And I just want to say, it's kind of crazy, because I've put people in treatment before that are 25, 30 years old, and they don't want to give the parent permission to talk to their therapist. Yet in the reality of it, some of these people have the emotional intelligence of they're 15 years old. They're a child.
And they're completely focused on their parents, but they don't want the parents to see they won't sign an ROI for the parents.
Right. Exactly. So what are you seeing in terms of guardianships and things like that?
So the guardianship is another way another one of the legal avenues we use for treatment. And we typically use that when there is more of a mental health type issue going on. Mm-hmm. And it may be that, we get people with schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder. And even if there's substance use going on with it, we'll probably go with a guardianship, because that we tend to need a sort of a longer term outlook, with that. And also the guardianship will give us the ability to get a court order for the person to take their medication. So, and also if there's finances, we get control of that. We can really, really turn the clock back to when they were less than 18 and take complete control of them. So we do a lot of guardianship. It's great for an eating disorder case. Sometimes we'll do both. We'll do them together.
Why is it great for an eating disorder case?
Well, because an eating disorder case may not have substance use. They may not fit within the four corners of a Marchman Act. But we can achieve the same goals, getting them into treatment, making sure they take medication with a guardianship. So, I will tell you, Mark, it's interesting. There are times that we've done it where there's been an intervention, a Marchman, and a guardianship all going on at the same time. It's crazy. But I think what people don't understand is they say, well, it doesn't have to be like, well, if I'm only doing an intervention, I don't have to do a Marchman Act. I happen to love working with the interventionists. First of all, it's a much gentler approach as opposed to me sending the cops over there. But as you know, there's a significant emotional component going on with the family, which having somebody like you there really, really helps us with that. And two, we're not clinicians. I work with a certain number of treatment centers that I'm comfortable, where I'd be comfortable sending my own family member to.
You're right.
At the end of the day, I need somebody like you who's got clinical experience to say, listen, Mark, this is the place that we've picked for them because it's clinically appropriate. And I'm like, great. You won't get an argument from me. Let's figure out how to get them there. So, people understand, these things all work really well together, which is why I say sometimes we'll do Marchman and guardianship. I've done interventions with a Marchman or intervention with a guardianship. If you've got the resources, it's great.
So I've done
like you case managing is fantastic for us.
So I did an intervention not too long ago where we had the paperwork done for the Marchman, and we didn't know how it was going to go because there was some mental illness, and so we were prepared to say, look, if push came to shove, you're going to treatment one way or another. And I always say, look, come with me. We'll stop at Starbucks. We'll get a coffee. We'll talk on the plane. We'll have a come on. This is the beginning, because they can't see this is the beginning of a whole life they never thought possible for themselves. And it is the softer, easier way. Because we do. Because real recovery is about family involvement. It's a familial, a systemic thing, and if we can do that, that's really our goal. So I'm going to wrap up in a minute because I'm getting nervous because I've never seen this warning before about liquid or something, and I keep dismissing it. So so at some point the phone's going to go, well, I'm smarter than you, and turn off. But I appreciate it. What other kind of what else in a summary should families know about Marchmans and bakeracts, and what should they keep in their hip pocket, and where can they find you?
Well, so they can find us online, drugandalcoholattorneys.com. They can call me 561-419-6095. They can email me, Mark with a K, unlike you're a C. I've got a cousin who's a C.
Yeah.
Mark at drugaddiction.com, or if they just Google my name, Mark Astor Attorney, I put a lot of content out there over the years, so
well,
they find me.
When we put this online, when we put this on YouTube, I'm going to link your website to it so
Thanks.
People can see in the description how to get in touch with you and ask questions and stuff like that. So,
okay. So yeah, I mean, they should be able to get a hold of me. And look, I'm a pretty much straight shooter. I mean, if I can't help somebody, I'll tell them. And I know that people like to call me and tell me their story, which I'm happy to hear. But if I don't think I can help you, and I think, like an intervention might be better, I'm going to say, listen, I don't think I can help you. You might want to talk to somebody like you, Mark, about doing an intervention.
Right.
Look, doing what we do, other than obviously the financial commitment, I mean, it's a serious commitment, of time and energy. I mean, it's emotional what we do, with the families, and they're scared, they're nervous, they haven't done this before. Or if they have done it before, they're scared it won't work. So, I mean, we recognize that. And I will sometimes say to a family, look, it sounds like you're not ready to do this. Here's an alternative,
Right.
Or,
right.
I get families that call me and they say, well, especially I get a lot of moms calling me. I've spoken to so many crying moms over the year. And
And
they say,
moms and sons. That's the combination.
And I'll ask them, I say, well, they'll tell me my son's using. Well, how do you know that? I just know. And you know what? Who knows better than mom? I mean, my own mother, if I'm having a bad day, my mother knows. I don't have to call her. She can feel it.
Right.
Moms know best. But in a court of law, me telling the judge, Your Honor, his mother can feel it. The judge will be like, Mr. Astor, we're in a court of law. You better have some evidence.
Doesn't meet the standard. Yeah.
Yeah. And so sometimes I've had moms call me and they say, look, I just know. And I say, well, when was the last time you spoke to little Johnny? Well, I spoke to him last night, but I haven't seen him in 3 months. Well, how do you know he's using? Well, I just know. I could just tell. And you know what? I'm sure she's right, but that isn't going to fly. I'm going to tell her, listen, I really appreciate you calling me, but I don't have enough evidence here. If we file this case, it's going to get dismissed, and you're going to be really upset with me. Here's an alternative. Why don't we talk about doing an intervention? And here's a great interventionist. Give him a call and see what he thinks. And then maybe that helps to, because once the person's in treatment, I can still marchman act them to keep them there.
Right. And similarly, that's something I talk about with families too, is that getting them there is one thing, keeping them there is another. And I tell them, you're going to get the call 3-4 days in, and the kids are going to say, get me out of here. The food's bad. They're torturing me. I'd rather be in prison. And then the parent is like, ugh, and then they call me and I say, he's fine. Absolutely fine. I tell parents, if your son or daughter calls you and they're really working you on the phone, just hang up. They're fine. Because I'm not putting anyone anywhere that I wouldn't go myself or put my kid. So they're good. Well, I really appreciate this. This was good conversation. I learned a lot, and the need for your services are certainly they're not diminishing. Unfortunately, there's still plenty of work for us to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because this whole COVID thing. I think the fallout in terms of the effect of people who have mental health issues and substance use issues is going to be felt for years. I mean, I'm not minimizing the COVID thing. I have family and friends who've gotten it, and there's no question it's deadly and very highly contagious. But the fallout from the people who have substance use and mental illness, I mean, it's going to be off the charts. I mean, my phone rings. There isn't a day that I wake up, including Saturday and Sunday, and don't see at least one person who's called my office in the middle of the night looking for help.
Right.
And I think that's going to continue for a long time.
I find usually the middle of the night calls are not the best, but
I learned not to take those calls in the middle of the night. I call them back in the morning, and sometimes
You call them back in the morning. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I have
No,
to.
I agree. I think this whole thing is forcing isolation, and we won't know for some time what the, somebody who is a problem drinker, but they still work, they still have someone and something to be accountable to every day and get up and, go somewhere. And now that they're, quote unquote, working from home, to me, that sounds like an opportunity to be drinking and using full time.
No question.
So, yeah. So, well, thank you again. I really enjoyed this. And, and I'll link the website to the comments, and people can reach out to you with any questions or anything like that. So,
thank you.
All right, man. Thank you. Have a great day.
So, bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.